Oh, folks, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that sound because it means it's time for another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast. So thank you to Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and to Mark Bershon at Website Amp for making all this possible. I'm so lucky to be here. I've got the best job in the world. My name's Jim Reed. You can find out about me and everyone else on the Wrecking Crew by going to rec.poker/crew. Or you could just take their word for it. We've got Eric, John, and Kim in the house today. Starting with Eric, why don't you tell the folks at home where they can find you and what's going on with you these days?
I'm Eric Jin, also known as Binkley on the Rec Poker Forum. You can find me on Twitter at Rec Binkley.
And I'm John Somsky. I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
And I'm Kim Kilroy. You can find me most places as PetVet, and in our home game is Fergie56.
And speaking of the home game, it's Monday night. We're recording this after the Chats edition of the podcast, like we often do. And every week we are playing in the nightly home game, the free play money one, where you can come and test your skills against each other and learn together. And just like every week, we're going to take a post from the rec.poker forums, which are free to join, and talk about it here on the air. So the first post we're going to look at tonight is by the one and only 5x5, Chris Jones, the membership content director here at Rec Poker. And his post is titled Cooler or Meh? With just 3 question marks. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that in American, but in Canada, that would be Meh? So cooler or Meh? Here's a hand I played this weekend. Did I make a mistake by not leading the turn because it will check through so often? And on this river, I just snap called, but is it really that easy for this big of a shove? Are we ever capable of folding this? Good questions from 5x5 himself. Why don't I just take us through the action, and then the group can talk about what we think we would do at various points. So this is in an ACR tournament, I believe. I don't know the buy-in, but it's 8 max. We're in the big blind as Chris, we are the hero, and we're holding the Jack of clubs, 6 of clubs. So we get an open raise, and we're quite deep. We're about 150 big blinds deep. We get an open raise from middle position to 2.5x. We get a call in the hijack, the small blind calls, and we are facing a 1.5 big blind raise with Jack 6 suited. I'm probably just calling this. I don't think it's that controversial. We're getting excellent odds with a pretty bad hand, but it's still capable of flopping well. So we could fold, we could raise, we could call. What does anyone think is the best play here?
Oh, suited hand, big blind. Yeah, I'm flatting.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so too. That's not the interesting part of the hand. So we've got the Jack of clubs and the 6 of clubs. The flop comes 6 of hearts, Jack of diamonds, 6 of spades. So an above average flop when you're holding Jack 6. And the small blind checks. I think we're going to check a lot here. And so we do check. We get a check from the original raiser. And then the hijack player, the last player in the hand, bets about 1/3 of the pot. The small blind checks or folds, and it's back to us. I think we have the option of raising or calling here, and we elect to call, and the original raiser folds. So I think some people will like a check raise there, but you're not really afraid of much, and you get to kind of keep your opponent's entire range in the hand by calling. So I see why Chris called. Anyone want to jump in on that point, or should we move on to the turn?
Well, one thing is that the original raiser does have jacks in the range.
Mm-hmm.
The other callers could. Some people do flat with their jacks, but sometimes they would 3-bet it, so it does remove some of their jacks. I know we're heavily blocking it. There's only one combination, but our hand isn't the absolute nuts. So I'm okay calling, because once you call and then the original raiser folds, you have that information like, okay, now we're only afraid of pocket sixes. No, actually not. No, actually we aren't, because we have the six. So now
Right.
we pretty much have the nuts right now. So I like the flat.
That's a great point. And you're not as worried about the late position player having jacks because they'd likely have 3-bet that pre-flop at least a somewhat high frequency. So
Yeah, the hard part with this type of a flop is you basically strangled the board. You're not
Mhm.
leaving anyone else any room to have a piece of it. I mean, unless the other player has a pocket pair, or maybe the case jack, ace jack or something like that. I guess not the case jack. There are two more, like Minkley just said, but there aren't very many hands that your opponent is going to continue with. So, and with a paired board on the flop, if you check raise or bet out at it, it looks so terribly strong. Of course, even just flat calling looks extremely strong on a board like this too.
now that's a great point because it's a rainbow flop. There is no straight draw. And so I do like that point, John, that calling doesn't really disguise the strength of your hand. But it does include a lot of other hands like those other pocket pairs and things like that that might be played that way that would not check raise. And there's not a lot of natural bluff candidates to include in a check raising range as well. Kim?
No, I was gonna say that I think that the hijack is it that leads out. I think that they have to be relatively strong on this flop leading into 4 people.
Mhm.
Like they're betting into 4 people, even though they're the last to act, right? Was it
Yes, they are the last act.
original?
That's right. They called pre-flop
They
in
went
position.
check, and the original caller and the original razor checks as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So I think that they have to be fairly strong to bet out into 4 people. Like,
Mhm.
but-
And it's hard to be strong on this board without exactly a jack
a jack,
or
yeah. Or
eight-
they could have
sevens
a
are
middle
better.
pair. Yeah,
Yeah.
7s are better. Yeah, I would
Yep.
agree. Or a 6.
Sure,
They
or a
could
6.
have,
Yeah, they've
you
got
know,
some 6s calling in
5, 6,
position there.
6, 7.
Yep.
You know,
Ace 6 for sure.
yeah.
Okay. Yep, I like that. That makes sense. So yeah, go ahead.
No, and I like the call as well. So
Mhm.
from the big blind at this point. Yeah.
Yes. So we do call, and the turn comes the 5 of clubs. So it's 6 of hearts, jack of diamonds, 6 of spades, 5 of clubs, very bricky. This is and Chris checks. And as it happens, the opponent checks behind. And so it just goes through. Chris asks in his post, did I make a mistake by not leading the turn because it will check through so often? I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is this a turn that we should be leading? Or do we get more value from our opponents continuing to bluff when they do? I always ask myself, is the second best hand that I'm value targeting, are they the kind of hand that's gonna call my bet but check behind if I check to them, or are they the kind of hand that's gonna fold to my bet or take a stab at this if I check?
Right. So the only thing I have here is that we're so deep that I don't mind trying to build the pot a little bit,
Mhm.
like to try and get some chips in. You can't take somebody's stack of 150 big blinds if you don't start getting some chips in at some point. So, I wouldn't mind a raise on the flop sometimes.
Mhm.
And
Because you're so deep.
because we're so deep,
Yep.
right? Yeah. And then if we had raised the flop, we could definitely lead this turn. But as played, I don't mind the check here.
Yeah, I think there's something nice about the lead in that our opponent has kind of defined their range by, well, I guess that's not true. Maybe we think they can be doing some, I don't know. It
They
feels
can have
like
a jack here.
yeah,
like we're really-
yeah. It does feel like that range that Kim put them on with like a jack or 7s to 10s, something like that, would play it this way.
The
So
problem is here, they're not the original raiser, right?
Right.
So how many ace jacks, king jacks, do they have all those still in their range? I guess they do. I
Yeah,
guess
most
they
of
do.
them,
I guess
most of them.
most people aren't three betting those early
Right.
from those big stacks.
John?
I was just gonna say with, as it was played, given that there was no 3-bet on the flop.
Mhm.
Or raise on the flop, not a 3-bet, raise on the flop. When the 5 comes, there's not much you could be representing other than a 6. If
Or
you're gonna,
jack.
right,
or jack,
if you're
yeah.
gonna be, well, if you're gonna take over the lead.
Right.
If someone else, if you called behind, if that card had been an ace, that'd be a really good spot to call behind, because one potential hand that your opponent could have would be ace king.
Right.
Particularly if,
They just called pre-flop though. They didn't rate. They were the
oh,
first
yeah,
caller after the initial raiser. So I
Yeah.
would take most ace kings out of their range.
well, but ace jack would still be in there, which
Yeah,
would give
yeah,
them
yeah.
2 pair,
Right.
which gives you a good spot to bet into them so that they can raise you.
Right.
Yes.
But with the 5, I don't see how that's possible. The only hand you would represent that would improve your hand would be like pocket 5s or something like that.
But if your screen name's 5
5
by
by
5,
5.
Well, true, but you don't want a hand calling that beats pocket 5s, right? Because that's pretty dangerous there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I guess, yeah, it really depends on what you think your opponent, if they have the kind of hand that, because the 5 didn't really help anybody, right? So the question is, do they have a hand that's good enough that they're going to continue with through a call? Because a lot of those hands will check back, I think, at that point, because you've kind of also established that you have some strength in this hand by calling that flop bet. So maybe that makes a better argument for leading, because they're less likely to continue at it, because your range just isn't very weak. Okay.
Yeah, I always struggle with these hands where you flop super strong,
Mhm.
because part of you wants to start building the pot, get money into the pot, but the other part, you have to allow your opponents to catch something
Right.
before they're going to actually pay you off.
Yeah.
So, I never know whether slow playing it is the right move to maximize your value, or whether playing it fast is.
Right.
If it's just a set, I tend to play those fast because it's very disguised and there's still 2 other cards on the board that your opponents could have. But in this case, I never know what to do.
I think if it was against the pre-flop raiser versus the caller, I think I would be more inclined to play it faster as well, because they have all the overpairs and strong hands in their range.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, we check.
Yep, check. And the river comes the 10 of hearts. So the final board, 6 of hearts, jack of diamonds, 6 of spades, 5 of clubs, 10 of hearts.
Right.
And we do lead. Chris leads for about 75 or 80% of pot. And the villain.
Solver likes that lead, by the way.
Yeah, likes the bigger sizing there. That makes sense. And the villain shoves all in, which again is pretty deep. The original bet was for 5,000, or a little less than 5,000, and the shove is to a little over 30,000. So Chris calls in real time. He says he calls pretty quickly, and I think it's, we get attached. I submitted a hand to Kim's pet vet hand history earlier this week in a very similar spot where I flopped a full house. I had pocket 6s and felt like I was just entitled to win that hand, and just kind of kept stringing the guy along until it turned out he was actually stringing me along with a bigger full house. And I also called pretty quickly on the river, because I think I was in that mindset where I was just trying to take this person to Value Town. And what happens here is Chris calls quickly, and the guy, after checking back the turn, river to 10, and he had pocket 10s, and that gave him the full house 10s full of 6s, which was bigger then Chris's full house 6 is full of jacks. And that's just how it goes.
And it's like how many times the pot shove was it? Like it was huge, right?
It was like 7 times. It was 7 times Chris's bet. It was like 7 or 8 times Chris's bet, and Chris's bet was pretty close to pot. So yeah, it was like a 5x.
5x,
Yeah, 5
yeah.
times the pot. Big shove.
So from the solver point of view, the solver likes the shoves with pocket jacks, pocket
Yep.
tens, and then for your bluffs, sometimes 8-6 suited, and a couple of other really bizarre ones a tiny percentage of the time.
Interesting. And it just, you don't get there with pocket 5s, I guess.
They don't have pocket 5s in the range there,
Right.
but yeah.
Well, I mean, you are occasionally going to just walk into someone with the nuts. That stinks. And it especially stinks when you've been trying to lay this trap the whole time. Why don't we take a minute and listen to what our friend Jonathan Little has to say, and then we can see if we can put a little bow on this for our listeners after.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
I would do it, folks. Don't make him angry. Just head over to PokerCoaching.com/recpoker and check out the deal. So yeah, any insights here, group? How do you, when you're in Chris's position there and suddenly this person makes a huge shove like that, what should we be thinking about? How can we prepare ourselves for that to not make a mistake here?
Well, I would certainly take longer to think about it.
Exactly. Yes. That's one of my mistakes is I'll snap and like, you know what? Once it's all in, you have all the time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You have your time bank, live, you have all the time that you can, especially when it's an unexpected move. That should at least have alarm bells going, oh, that I didn't expect that. Let me take a second, think about why they could be doing that. I think ultimately you might end up at the same action if you think about it, but at least you know that you thought about it. You put you went inside, is there some piece I was missing that I should pick up on?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about this, I'm not seeing what hand would make this play that isn't a bluff that we beat.
Right.
I mean, any hand that is shoving there should have us beat, unless for some reason they're really overplaying like ace-6, and don't believe we have a 6 at all. But
that's such a big shove for that.
I know.
Yeah,
I
no,
know it is.
they'd be overplaying it. Like, yeah, I agree.
But there are people who think that trips are the nuts.
Yep.
So, they might do that, particularly in the smaller buy-in tournaments.
Oh
And
yeah.
we don't know what buy-in this is.
No, we've seen this happen in the field though. That definitely people overvalue hands like trips for sure.
Right.
I would say
So,
when he makes this move, he's targeting specifically a 6, as the big blind having a 6 in his hand when he over shoves like this. For
That makes
value.
sense.
Not a bluff, as for value, I mean, right?
Yep.
well, so I guess, the hands that they could possibly have would be a 10-6, if they have the case 6, a 5-6, in anything that paired the board with a 6, I could see someone doing the shove with this, thinking that their full house must be good, and they're just hoping to target, either a higher 2 pair or someone who has the case 6. So in the end, I guess I might end up calling depending upon my thought of the player. If the player's very good, he shouldn't be doing it unless you're beat. So, but other than that, it's really hard to fold a full house. Goes back to Captain Zebo's theorem. Back in the day, that on 2+2, he always said no one ever folds the full house. So if you have top full house, just shove it in and hope to get called by second full house.
Yep. Can confirm.
Yeah, I'm not folding here.
Yeah.
Hopefully I would take my time and think through the possibility, but I'm not
Yeah.
folding here.
If you were in a big buy-in event here, wouldn't you think about folding?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're only in the 3rd level, right? Something
Right.
like that.
Right. But like you said, online, people do crazy things. I mean, it could be complete error. Who knows?
Right, online people do crazy
Yeah.
things, that's true. But
yeah.
I mean, I'd like to have pocket 6s here to make this call, to be honest. with you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the hand you feel perfectly confident with. That's right. Well, there's a great response here in the post itself from Keith Brandt, who goes by Monkey System, where he's actually uploaded a GTO Plus solved spot where he goes in with some assumptions, and he talks about a few frequencies and bet sizings and the kind of hands we might use on different streets. So I do encourage our listeners, go to Rec.Poker, get a free account. You can go look at the forum post yourself and add to them. And if you're listening to this over audio, go to the YouTube channel, look for the Rec Poker community and subscribe there, and watch along in video. We have more fun in video, and sometimes we share screen and show charts or graphs or something that we're looking at, and it's a little easier to follow along with some of the strategy talk. But I guess without anything else on this particular hand, I want to thank Keith and Chris for their comments in the forums. Does anyone else want to leave any insights for our audience before we roll on out of here?
Yeah. So I know also in our Discord channel,
oh yeah,
there was a lot of discussion there, like all the good comments. People had fun with it, thinking about it. But ultimately, I always look back and like, it's fun to discuss, but I wouldn't lose sleep over this if I were Chris, because how often does this happen? Right. This is a low frequency spot that you got wrong once, but how often is it going to happen?
Yeah. And I guess the one note we could take out of here that I really like is just use your time. Just use your time. It costs you nothing. Use your time. And Eric said it best, especially when someone does something that's unnatural in the moment, something that breaks the flow, something that's like, oh, wait a second, that's not what I was expecting here. Then use your time and just think about what that actually means for their range. Because if you're thinking, oh, they have some bluffs here, I'll just check call and I feel great about that. But then they shove, 7 times the pot. Do they still have those bluffs? Maybe that changes their range a bit. What do you know about this player? So yeah, use your time. Use your time, especially when things get weird. Use your time. You never know. You just never know. All right. Well, thanks to Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and of course, Mark Prashon and website AMP. And thanks to our listeners and everyone who writes in the forums. You're all the best. See you again next week.